Welcome back to .NET Rocks. This is Carl Franklin.
And this is Richard Campbell.
And we are at Ignite in Orlando with thousands and thousands of our closest friends.
Yes.
And it's big. Let's just leave it there.
It's just a big, big show. We're back in Orlando again. Yeah. It reminds me of the old tech heads, only bigger.
Only bigger. Dmitry, Lyalin, and Ed Thomson are here. We'll talk to them in just a minute. But first, we have this little matter of better know a framework.
All right, dude, what do you got?
I found a new language, and it's new to me. I might not be new to everybody else because actually it's trending right now. It's called Rust.
Oh, yeah.
And Rust is a systems programming language that runs blazingly fast, prevents seg faults, and guarantees thread safety.
Takes all the fun out of it, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, right. Seg faults. God, I haven't heard that in a long time.
That's pretty old school.
Here's the feature list right on their website. Zero cost abstractions, move semantics, guaranteed memory safety, threads without data races, trait-based generics, pattern matching, type inference, minimal runtime, and efficient C bindings. And I also have to say the first example they show on there has the keyword let.
Let.
Remember let?
Very old school.
Very old school, right?
It seems like a low-level language.
Yeah. And so when you go looking to see who's using it, some names that you have heard of: Dropbox, Telenor, AppSignal, Atlassian, NPM. A lot of people that you know and love are using this.
Yeah,
so,
it sounds like a services level type thing.
Yeah. That's what I got. Yeah, it's quite interesting. Anyway, that's what I got. Who's talking to us, Richard?
Grabbed a comment off of show 1237, the one we did with Bill Wagner back in December of 2015, talking about GitHub fundamentals.
That was a great show.
It was a great show, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it spawned a ton of comments. So lots to shop from here, but I grabbed this one from Richard Rixom, who said, I normally use SVN with Tortoise SVN as my Windows client. I've done that. That's a great tool.
Yeah, doesn't that hook right into the shell?
Right into the shell. So you just like whatever you want to source control, you can control.
Right.
My company moved from using VSS, man, dude, 90s, to SVN quite a few years ago. And for home use, I recently looked at using Git with GitHub and integration into Visual Studio Community Edition, which even 2 years ago it had. This worked really well. I now have a home-built Git server working on a Raspberry Pi.
Wow.
Because you can run a Git server on a Raspberry Pi.
Who would do that?
Apparently Richard would. So, you know what? You could do it alongside a .NET Rocks mug, because a .NET Rocks mug is on its way to you. And if you'd like a .NET Rocks mug, write a comment on the website at .NETRocks.com or via any of our social media, because we publish every show to Facebook and Google+. And if you comment there and we read it on the show, we'll send you a mug.
And YouTube. Got to add YouTube to the list.
Yeah, we're publishing all the shows on YouTube now.
Yeah, we have a YouTube channel.
Indeed.
Yep. You won't see anything.
No. Well, there's that one that should be out now with Scott Hunter that we recorded here at Ignite that does have video. Yeah. So we can publish that on YouTube.
Yep. And definitely follow us on Twitter. He's at Rich Campbell. I'm at Carl Franklin. Send us a tweet. We rust-proof them.
I bet you do. Little WD-40.
And let's introduce our guest today. Edward Thomson is Program Manager for Visual Studio Team Services, where he focuses on Git and version control. And before becoming a program manager, he had developed version control tools at GitHub, Microsoft, and SourceGear. So he wrote the code that probably merges your pull requests.
It's you.
Just saying. He's a maintainer for libgit2 and the co-host of All Things Git, the podcast about Git. Dmitry Lyalin is the Senior Product Manager for Visual Studio Team Services and TFS. During his 18 years of professional software development, he's worked in many companies, but most recently joined Microsoft, where he's been employed for 9 years. While at Microsoft, he's taken on multiple roles, including Microsoft Consulting and Premier jobs, before moving to corporate to be part of the Visual Studio wider product team. In his spare time, he loves to write code every week, explore Washington State outdoors with his wife, and is a passionate PC gamer. Very cool.
He's also one of the very original advocates for Humanitarian Toolbox. My HT box wouldn't be where it was without Dmitry.
Well, thank you.
I was very happy to help. It was one of those kind of things that worked out just by a little bit of chance and a little bit of hard work.
I think you called me and said, dude, if I have to make another Northwind demo, I'm going to kill myself. Please, can we make something more meaningful than that? And that led to already. I mean, it wasn't that simple. There was a long path between those things, but that, and I had a call from the Red Cross, and we talked to some other folks, and ta-da, Visual Studio 2015. Already as a sample app.
And also responsible for the guest podcasters at all these great Microsoft conferences.
Doing that stuff too, right?
Yeah.
You know, when you love something, you've got to help it. And, you know, if I'm in a position to help, I've been trying to help. And I remember, you know, just, before I called you with the famous comment of like, if I do another another sample app. It's going to be the end of my life. And it's true, marketing teams around the world, all these big companies, we constantly waste money on sample apps. And I use the word waste kind of loosely because, of course, you've got to build something sometimes, whatever, right?
Sure.
Right.
But if you have a chance to do something better with it, something better than just a sample, why not? And you guys had this great, platform for getting volunteers together and connecting with the nonprofits. So really kudos to you guys just as much as anything I contributed, because without that, my money would have just been, all right, what ideas do we have? I wouldn't have had any good ones.
Sure.
It's great when a plan comes together like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, 2 years further on, Jeff Fritz worked on the original version back in 2015. I just had him in a codathon in Sweden 2 years further on in the Core 2 version of Already. And he's like, none of my old code is here. I'm like, yeah.
It's been a lot of progress there.
It's a complex project now. Like, one of our problems now is it's hard for new people to get involved in the project. We've had 150 contributors now. It's 3,000 pull requests. It's complicated. It's just not a small thing to step into anymore.
Building software is hard.
Yeah, weird, huh?
It is.
Yeah,
But
go figure.
hey, it's software that saves lives, right? There's smoke detectors out in the world today because we help coordinate folks to get them installed, and it works. It does its job.
And if it was easy, you could buy them at Walmart. Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, in the world of Git, what is new, Ed?
What is new? There's a lot of things new in Visual Studio Team Services and in the on-premises Team Foundation server. The coolest thing, I think, is a total end-to-end workflow for managing your code changes and tracking them along with your work items. And here at Ignite, Donovan showed this off on stage in the keynote. Donovan Brown, of course, who I'm sure you've had on the show.
Oh, yeah.
We have.
Of course.
He rubbed DevOps all over it.
He is a force of nature.
I'm still trying to wipe some of that stuff off.
I
It's
know.
sticky.
You'll never get it off. Once Donovan rubs DevOps on it, it ain't never coming off. But it's the coolest thing, man. And he showed this. If you're in your Kanban board, if you're in your planning board, you can just right click on a work item and say new branch. And that'll create a branch on the server. And of course, you can create a branch just, locally on your machine.
Yeah.
Do whatever you want. But when you do it on the server, just with that little right click menu, now whenever you make any changes on your local machine, commit things, and push them up to the server will just tie that back together automatically.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah, so you don't have to worry about
It's
going
a nice
through.
abstraction.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't have to worry about going through and linking your work item to your commits or
Right.
to your pull request. It takes care of all that for you. And so it's just these little niceties that we're bringing to the table.
I always thought Git had just this great language for doing exactly what you want it to do. And, that's why it had a little bit of a learning curve. But seeing these new abstractions over it, and even older abstractions like, Tortoise, for example, is a great abstraction using a tool we already use, the file system and the Explorer.
With a shell extension.
And this is just another great abstraction that you can utilize on your terms.
For sure. I think you're absolutely right. I think that Git itself is an amazing tool. It's got an amazing, like the low levels. And that's really where I kind of focus, is like the really deep down nitty gritty stuff. And that stuff's amazing, but it's hard to use, right?
Yeah.
The command line's kind of rough. So as we keep building out these new tools on top of it, I think that's really what's going to make developers successful.
Yeah, I think one of the things that a lot of people just don't realize, they even have Git support, or when we're very biased people here at Microsoft. We live in this world of our own products, so we can even make this horrible assumption sometimes. People know what Visual Studio Team Services is. Like, we'll get into the interviews and we're like, yeah, let's talk about it. But let me lay some foundation for us, because I want folks that are listening to this to really know this is there for you, right? So even if you have TFS, right, the on-premises product, and even if you have an older version like 2013, 2015, you can start creating Git repos. Like, that's part of the product. We added it back in 2013. When I started in this team, that was the first thing I helped launch. And when we moved TFS into the cloud and called it Visual Studio Online originally, if you guys remember that.
Yeah, sure.
I wasn't a fan, I'll be honest, but it's okay. We survived. And now we're calling it Visual Studio Team Services. Now that's TFS in the cloud.
And I've always known TFS as a source repository. So, it's just sort of, I think people have always thought it's TFS or Git.
Sure.
Not and Git. That seems odd to me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think TFS and they think that centralized version control system, right click, check out, files are locked, and it's a lot more than that.
And there's a certain group of developers that's the way they want to work with source code too.
Yeah.
Like, there are folks that are very happy in that environment and quite uncomfortable with the sort of distributed merge conflict approach that you merge writer that Git and other distributed repositories represent.
And that's understandable. We're not going to take that away. I mean, TFVC will never go away. There are people within Microsoft still using it.
Sure.
They're never going to stop because they like it too.
That's how they work.
We have both, and people can choose, and they can have multiple, repos within one team now, so that they can choose to have both in one team. That's fine. One of the things that I really like about Git, and I am biased, right? I came from TFVC world. We started the show with Visual Source Safe, right? Conversation. Yep. I started there. That was my beginning of my career. And when I moved into TFS, I continued, of course, using TFVC. And I even when Git was released, even when I helped ship it, I wasn't using it. Mm-hmm. So I'll just be very honest there, because it's new, right? Like Carl said, if something new, it's always freaking scary. Mm-hmm. So the beautiful thing is, once I did look at it though, I realized what the hype was all about. It's really a beautiful way to do source control, having that local repository, right?
Yeah.
Like people forget that aspect of it. It always becomes like a side thing. They're like, Git is source control, right? And if you're biased Microsoft way of doing it, you just think of it the same way, but it's not the same, right? It's different. It's different for a reason.
Yeah.
And people like that difference for a reason.
Do you get the sense that the strength of the Git side of this is larger teams or more distributed teams? Like, I know the TFS could do all of that. It's just to feel like TFS is happier when everybody's sitting in the same floor.
Definitely.
The
closer you are to your TFS server, the happier you are if you're using TFVC.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I used to think that if I had 2 copies somewhere on disk of a project that I was working on, that was when I started using source control, because I didn't want to, which one, you get into that hell, which is like, oh, I edited the wrong copy. Well, how do I pull out all that stuff and move it over here? But now it's just like, I have a project. It's got source control.
Yeah, you just run Git in it as soon as it's there.
Yeah.
It's just part of reality.
Same way that it's a whole lot easier to write on paper than on the wall, right?
Absolutely.
Like, it's just a basic organizational element.
Do you guys have any metrics in terms of how many people aren't using source control? It seems like there's a lot.
It seems like there is a lot, but it seems like it's better every year. It used to be, 10 years ago when we were building source control tools, I was at SourceGear. We were working on plugins to Visual Source Safe.
Woot.
Yeah. And, we would come to this conference back when it was Tech Ed, and people would come up and they'd be like, what's source control? Now nobody ever says what's source control to me. So at least the education is there. Even if not everybody's using it, everybody knows what it is. So that's the first barrier that we've solved.
I feel like the abstractions that we've had over the years have been challenging. And I think just because of some of the language around, pull, push, merge, like some of these verbs that, need to be disambiguated a bit.
I agree.
Yeah. And especially in Visual Studio, the stuff that's there's like a couple of different screens that all look the same. And, you've kind of get the feeling that, oh man, is this what I want to do? Or was that what I want to do? And am I going to screw something up and overwrite something? There's just irrational kind of fear about it.
I don't think it's irrational at all. It's your source code. This is your lifeblood.
Yeah.
If you screw that up, if you push something to production that you didn't test, that you're not sure about.
Who would do that? Nobody does that.
Yeah.
I think everybody can admit they've done this at least once, if not more, which is like before you pull changes down from the server, you make a copy of your local disk stuff, and you're like, just in case I pull something down and overwrite something I forgot to check in or merge or whatever, right? You have that paranoia, and that's fine, but it's much better to have source control than not. I mean, anytime I run into people that don't use source control, especially in distributed teams, I've still heard of people using zip files on network drive as a way to coordinate. I mean,
copy of my project 99 folder.
Final. Final 2.
That's always
really
a good
truly
one.
final.
That's always a good one to name it. Okay. Final. Oh, well, wait a minute. Final 2? Final 3?
Final.
It always happens. I think we're seeing a lot of new UI tools come around that are really helping new users understand Git a little bit better. Git Kraken has some really cool visualizations. You can kind of drag and drop stuff. And there's another one called Gmaster that's coming out. And these all have great integration into like Visual Studio Team Services and to GitHub. And so I think it's really lowering the barrier to entry for version control.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, all the tools are really awesome. That's one of my favorite things about Git. Like, if I'm using Visual Studio Code, it works with Git, right? If I'm using the Git client for GitHub, that's just Git. I mean, everything is just Git. The underlying source control manager part of the code, the open source thing that, the Linus started back in the day. I mean, that's standard. So all these different tools, all these different repositories, everything else, it's all the same thing. So when you move across them or you switch tools, you don't have to relearn the paradigm. You don't have to, worry that something isn't going to work. It's not proprietary to Microsoft. Like, all of that stuff is gone, right? This is a truly community project, and there's so many tools. And even at the command line, I was so biased already towards Visual Studio over the years that it was a little bit scary when I first decided I'm going to learn the Git, command line tools on Windows. And oh my gosh, I'm actually kind of liking Git. I'm starting to remember the early Dmitry when I started back when, I still did like some Perl and PHP, and, I was starting to just do classic, ASP, and that's when Interdev started to make me an IDE person.
Interdev?
Interdev,
Did you say Interdev?
I said Interdev. I'm
I
old.
Get chills, just like that.
But we used to be in the command line all the time, and then I got away from that. But Git is really awesome, and the tools are really solid, and they're very mature.
I love to see Git being used for stuff other than code. Like as a document management repository, for example, or graphics. It's got so many more applications than code, but that's just what we use it for.
Absolutely.
Mostly.
Well, it's just files in the end. And we're really focused on GitHub right here, right? Like the tooling here is about being able to work with repositories in GitHub.
Well, as far as open source goes, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, all open source is on GitHub these days, right? But for your company, you got a lot of options. You don't necessarily need all the great open source community stuff that GitHub brings. If you're just hosting Git repositories within your company, you can do it in Visual Studio Team Services. We've got, great repository hosting capabilities. We've got all the pull request stuff, everything that you need to collaborate within your team. So we're really focused on what we call inner source, which is kind of open source for your company.
Right.
So that's something we do within Microsoft. The Windows team is now in a Git repository,
which is astonishing to me.
The biggest Git repository in the world.
Yeah.
Those repositories will still be like in Azure, let's say. So they'll still be online. They just won't be in the open source world.
Well, they're in Visual Studio Team Services, right? I mean, that's the whole thing. Like even you guys, I'm like sitting here. I want to give you guys a Visual Studio Team Services hug because that's what it is. That's where the Git repository lives. It doesn't live in Azure. I mean, VSTS itself lives in Azure, right? So it's an Azure hosted project. But you don't have to like be creative or come up with a way to host your repository like Windows does.
You just turn it on.
Yeah, you just go to Visual Studio Team Services, and it's free for up to 5 people in your team.
Yeah.
So if you're one person and you just want to do source control, that's what I do. And I write code. I mean, I have no code that I worry my machine's going to explode, I'm going to lose. I have my VSTS, I sync it, and I'm done. But if you have a big team, it scales up to Windows size, and that's like how many thousands of people?
4,000 developers working
4,000
in the Windows
developers.
code base every day.
So if I have some private repositories out on GitHub, easy to move into Team Services.
Yeah, very easy. You can just move them over.
Simple.
There's actually a little button you can just like click and import a repository right from GitHub.
It's done. Wonderful.
Yeah, lots of people don't realize that. Like they think that VSTS, Visual Studio Team Services, is like this thing you only use if you're a company.
Right.
Well, I mean, I love GitHub. I have nothing against GitHub. We work with them all the time.
Yeah.
But they do charge, right? I mean, money is money, and they charge for private repos. We don't. If you're a person or you're up to 5 people and you want to store your source control in VSTS, go for it. Come.
That's huge.
Be part of our family. You have to use no other feature.
Hey, Dmitry, give us 1 second here to pay the bills.
This portion of .NET Rocks is brought to you by our friends at JetBrains. Hey, how often do you profile memory usage in your .NET apps? What if you could automate memory usage checks so that they're executed every time you commit a change? You can actually do that with .memory unit from JetBrains. .memory unit is a free unit testing framework for monitoring .NET memory usage. You write unit tests that check your code for all kinds of memory issues, and then run the tests on your machine or in a continuous integration server like TeamCity or VSTS, just like you do with regular unit tests. You can track how much memory is allocated, check memory for objects of a specific type to prevent memory leaks, or compare several memory snapshots in a unit test to see if memory usage is creeping up. Learn more and download .memory unit from jetbrains.netrocks.com, or just search for a package called .memory unit on the NuGet gallery.
And you listen to .NET Rocks. Carl and Richard here at Ignite in Orlando with Ed Thomson and Dmitry Lyalin, and talking about the deeper Git integration in VSTS.
Yeah.
Because it's been around for a long time.
Like since 2013.
Yeah. We've had lots of versions. So it's just, do you find you have folks that want to be able to bounce between different repositories? Is that actually a good idea? Or, make a migration?
I find that it's easiest if you put everybody in a single repository.
For sure. And my experience has been moving repositories is hell. Like you're going to lose something.
Yeah. It's bad. It's real bad.
It's real bad. So once a project's gotten to a V1 on a given source control strategy, changing it is almost not worth it.
It's real challenging. Yeah. I mean, what we recommend there is just a tip migration. You know, like don't worry about trying to migrate your history over.
Yes.
Just leave it. Turn your existing server read only.
Yep.
You know, you're going to need that history sometime.
Stick it in a VM.
Yes.
You know.
Don't get rid of it. But at the same time, don't worry so much about history because you're never going to make it perfect.
No.
So why try?
After the first week, your chances of looking back there are low.
That's the one.
You know, but it's that 1 week.
It is that 1 week. That's a bad week, but it's only 1 week and you get past it.
Go on vacation for that week.
Yeah. You totally get past it.
Yeah.
But no, we recommend everybody, if you're working on a project, let's say there's a back end, let's say there's a front end, these things are tied together. You know, you want to version them together. So put them in the same repository.
Yeah, so the repository is for the project, really.
Yeah.
Not for the elements.
Yeah.
And the battle here is teams, right? It's like I've got an outsourced group that's doing the front end piece. I've got an internal group that's doing the back end piece. They may or may not get along, right? Like
or you may or may not want everybody to have access to your secrets, right? You know, your secret files or your password things that you have in there.
Well, don't check those out.
Yeah.
You have to have a different strategy for that.
That's what you need to tell people.
That's right. That's right. I mean, if you just Google, and this is a bit of a problem with the big open repositories, if you just Google SSH private key, you'll just see key after key checked into GitHub. It's crazy.
People do it all the time.
Yeah, every couple of months we see this story and Hacker News about, so do this search, and it's like, oh, geez.
So tell us about Secret Store or Key Vault.
Yeah, Azure Key Vault. So the idea is that you can actually put your secrets into Azure Key Vault, and then while you're doing the deploy, you can just pull those out and set them as a variable in your deployment process. And that way you don't ever check in your secrets.
Yeah.
And you never should. You never should.
Yeah, one of the coolest things that you could do, and I've seen people do this, which is the idea that you don't have to start in the public space, especially when you're just starting some project and you're not sure, you know, if your code's going to be ready to be in GitHub in the public sphere, or if you're not sure if you even want to make it open source. Like, you can start with Visual Studio Team Services, go on there, create an account, put your code up on there, and when you're ready to move your repo, it's really not that difficult at the end of the day, especially when you're one or two people in the beginning, and it's very, you know, you don't have this large team of people all confused. You could just migrate it out, pull it down, and push it up, and your commits will go with it, your branch history, if you want, will go with it. The thing about Git, the thing that, like, again, being a biased, you know, TVFS developer using old Microsoft source control, is that I did not appreciate a lot of these things in the beginning, but I do now. The fact that on your disk is a copy of the server, right? It's not like pointing to a server. It is the commit history, it's the branch history as much as you want to pull down. And when you want to migrate it, that makes it so much easier than having to say, okay, server A, point to server B, and start copying stuff. You have it local. So even if the server blows up, you actually maintain the full history of what's been happening. It's really awesome.
I don't know that I would have to do the research on this, but my gut tells me people don't set out to make an open source project. They set out writing some code to help themselves.
Yes.
Right.
Eventually realize it's a tool.
Yeah.
And then they mature that tool themselves, then think, I should probably share this with others. Like, it's sort of a process that happens. At some point you go, maybe I should, should I sell this as a closed source product, or do I just want to give it, put it out in the world, and maybe other people can benefit from this because I don't want to be a tool maker and deal with all of those headaches. And so it makes total sense to me that you invariably start with a private repo first.
Yeah. People think of Git and they say Git, then they say GitHub, and they start interchanging the two, but it's not the same thing. GitHub is a service. It's a company. They use Git as under the hood thing as the source control management system.
Right.
And on top of it, they created all these ideas that are also often just confused. Even I'm honest, I was confused by this in the beginning too. When I heard of forking, I'm like, that's a Git thing. And it's like, no, that's a GitHub thing. GitHub created the notion of taking a project and creating another copy of the project that other people can then start editing in their account in the public or private space.
Right.
But these things weren't like it's part of Git. Linus, when he made Git, didn't put that into the Git commands, there was no fork command, right?
Yeah.
But the cool thing is even, other people in the industry like Microsoft are starting to appreciate this, not like a standard, but like we now have forking in Visual Studio Team Services for your private projects. So if Windows wants to fork me a copy of something, they could do that, right? Or whatever. But again, there's a difference, right?
But that speaks to this concept of GitHub flow, right? There's sort of we use
pull
this at
requests.
IssueBox.
Right.
The method by which volunteers or, external developers, not necessarily part of your team, but be able to contribute to a project and feed back to you in a way that is manageable, that is not threatening to the project, is actually a useful contribution. And I think it's forking's a key part of making GitHub flow make sense.
Yeah, GitHub brought so much love on top of Git, right? The issues, the pull requests, the forking, the fact that it's, has a huge infrastructure to provide, a free service, right? Think of what GitHub does for the community. I love that. They provide free hosting for as much code as you want to put up there, as much assets files, media files, whatever part of your project you can stick up, documentation. You can put a website up on top of Git. there's so many things that GitHub will do.
Recipes up there.
Yeah, there's recipes. People do all sorts of crazy stuff. But let's talk about the developer for a second. Often, especially when you're kind of, Richard, like you started, when you're this new developer and new in a sense, like you're new to a project that it's your baby, this is a new project for you, and you're new maybe to open source. You've never contributed to it. GitHub is therefore kind of scary to put your code. Evie and I hesitate a little bit, like, this is a kind of cool utility, but is it clean enough? Did I put enough comments? Am I using the right standards?
Is it good enough to be scrutinized?
Yeah, and then unless you're paying GitHub, you can't put it up there in private. So maybe you do have a zip file, or you're boxing it or OneDriving a copy of your code and hoping that works. Well, go use VSTS. That's always my thing. It's free.
And you're not making a commitment that you can't change from. It's very easy to be in VSTS and go, okay, now let's push this to GitHub.
Yeah, I'm so passionate about this because it's there for people, just like GitHub is there for people, and I want folks to know about it. And again, TFS, all organizations from 2013 and up, if you're running that version, you can have Git, the same Git as anything else. One of my favorite features is the import from GitHub, right? So if you have a project up there that you found and you're like, oh, this is a cool library, maybe I want to make some tweaks. But again, if you're still a little bit terrified of making, contributions, sending a pull request to the project owner and giving them some suggestions, go try it locally. Go try that workflow locally. You can do it.
Right.
Yeah, pull it down. It's awesome. I'm going to demo that in my session during this conference so folks can take a look.
Awesome.
Cool.
Awesome. Hey, Richard.
Yeah, buddy.
Guess what time it is?
It must be that happy time again.
Yeah. It's time to announce my new Git superhero persona, Repo Man. Just when you thought your repository was paid off, boom, Repo Man comes in and takes it back.
I was going to say 4Q, but that's off the light. I'm not going to do that. That's not right. I feel bad. I take that bad.
Get it?
I apologize.
Get it?
Yeah.
All right. Never mind. It's actually time to give away a D-Experience subscription from DevExpress to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. Become a UI superhero with DevExpress UI controls and libraries, and deliver elegant .NET solutions that address customer needs today, and leverage your existing knowledge to build next-generation touch-enabled solutions for tomorrow. Whether it's an Office-inspired application or a data-centric analytics dashboard, DevExpress Universal ships with everything you'll need to build your best without limits or compromise. And check out their DevExtreme React Grid, built from the ground up to fully support all the cool features that come with React, like the virtual DOM and state controllers like Redux and all that. It supports master detail, sorting, grouping, paging, and editing. You can check it out and test it for free by getting it from GitHub, of all places. Learn more and download your free 30-day trial of DevExpress Universal at devexpress.com/superhero.
All right, buddy. Who's our winner?
Today's winner, Richard, is Shane Holder.
Congratulations, Shane.
Yeah.
Golf clap for you, sir.
Yeah, Shane just won the D-Experience subscription, a big pile of awesome from our friends at DevExpress, just for being a member of the .NET Rocks fan club. And if you don't know what that is, go to .NETRocks.com, click on the big Get Free Stuff button, answer a few questions, and join the fan club. We have thousands of members all over the world, and every show we like to give away stuff from our sponsors. And every December, we give away a $5,000 technology shopping spree to one lucky member of the .NET Rocks fan club. But you got to sign up to win. We also like to ask our guests, and we'll start with you, Dmitry. If you had $5,000 to spend on technology today, what would you buy?
I would say a gaming laptop, one of those really high-end ones. And there's some now that are in the 4 or 5K range. So
20-inch curved displays.
You know,
laptop in the sense of if you have a steel reinforced asbestos-lined lap, you can use this as a laptop.
Yeah,
I
you
would
should
love
talk,
one.
Richard.
Yeah, I know.
You had the biggest laptop I ever saw, actually.
I wouldn't go for the biggest one, but I would go for like the most compact one. I mean, I forget the name of it, but there's one company that actually makes this really compact, really powerful, like desktop.
Voodoo, Razer, they're gorgeous machines.
Does it have its own nuclear reactor built into it?
Yeah, but I'm such a fan of like disconnecting sometimes, and gaming is how I do it.
What's your preferred game these days, bud?
I've been playing a lot of Elder Scrolls Online.
Yeah.
I've really been enjoying that. I've enjoyed, Fallout quite a bit. I mean, I've been kind of going back and forth, the new and the old. Borderlands, still a huge fan of Borderlands too. Me and my wife, we played together actually over the LAN.
Borderlands? That's great.
That's such an awesome game. So there you go.
Funny.
That'd be my choice. More gaming hardware.
Little FPS.
Oh, very good. Ed?
Well, I'm not going to bring a unique idea to this party, but for me, it's a HoloLens.
Yeah,
Right.
It's always a good choice.
Yeah, I'm not the only one on the show that goes that way, but my wife's a mathematician.
Oh, wow.
And in particular, she's into the complex numbers and the Mandelbrot set, which is
Nice.
amazing. I would
Yeah.
love to dive into the Mandelbrot set on a HoloLens.
As a visualization.
I would,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow.
You can do some very cool things in that.
When people say they want to get a HoloLens, I just feel guilty because I have one in my office.
Do you
Sorry.
really?
Yeah. Being on the marketing team as a programmer has some advantages. We have budgets.
That's awesome.
And we bought two about a year ago. And I remember bringing it home and showing it to my wife for the first time. I mean, it's still kind of a heavy, clunky device. It's not like for average person if they're not super into it. But when I turned it on, her whole attitude changed about it. She's like,
It's
oh
the
my
taste
God.
of the future, right?
Absolutely.
I'm standing somewhere else. This is freaking amazing.
Yeah, it's really quite
Awesome
powerful.
tech.
Fractals for the win.
That's
I
right.
almost wonder if Mandelbrot says would be better in straight up VR, like a completely artificial.
Yeah, that's what I was
environment.
thinking
Yeah,
too.
I wonder that, but I'd like to find out.
Yeah, yeah.
I'd like
It's-
to walk down one of those spirals and
Wouldn't that be
see where-
awesome?
see-
Yeah.
see if it ends anywhere.
It turns out it doesn't.
No.
It's a lot of walking.
It doesn't.
It's
Go right
really
ahead.
fun.
Get your exercise.
Yeah.
So if we're jumping back into this now, one of the cool things if I am now checking my code directly into GitHub is now I have access to all that tooling around automated deploy and so forth. Or do I stick strictly with what normally Visual Studio's, sort of app veyors, options and those kinds of pipelines for automated deployment?
Well, the one thing about GitHub is they don't have like a CI/CD system. They don't have a build system. They just store the code and then they do all the kind of social coding aspects around it, right? The issues and the pull requests to make the changes. That stuff is awesome in GitHub. But the one thing that Visual Studio Team Services has, and same thing for TFS, again, they're the same freaking product. So no matter which one you're using, you've got the ability to do builds, release management, and things like CI/CD out to Azure or other clouds for extensibility. VSTS is very extendable as well. So if you want to plug in your own build system or your own source control system, I mean, any component as part of that flow is replaceable. There's a whole marketplace full of stuff that people can choose from. But yeah, the release thing is super important. Most modern shops, they call themselves modern, they do some sort of CI/CD, right? They have a cloud, whether that's AWS or Azure, and they're pushing their code through some gated process or for some process they hopefully trust and rely on.
Yeah.
And we can help set that up for people. It's really not that difficult. Donovan, who we talked about earlier, does this demo all the time where in like 5 to 10 minutes he
does
sets up
4 of them in an hour.
Yeah, he does 4 in an hour.
I've watched him do it.
Yep.
But in 10 minutes, he can show you how to set up CI/CD out to Azure. It's really not a big deal, which means you got your ASP.NET project, your web API, whatever. You're storing the source in Git. You're then triggering upon committing code, some sort of build. If that build is successful, you're running tests or maybe not.
Yep.
But then
Hopefully you are.
and then at some point you can say, okay, if everything goes well, or if I'm not doing tests, good luck to me. Let me do a deployment out to Azure, and that's where CI/CD, continuous integration and delivery, comes in, and that is something we do super well. And GitHub doesn't do that.
There are tools out there like Octopus, for example, that latch into this whole system very nicely too.
Yeah, we allow all sorts of companies to plug into the marketplace. We're an open system, and again, when we talk to like Java developers and they hear we have Jenkins support, they're like, really?
Yeah.
I thought VSTS was for Microsoft stuff. We're like, well, it's made by Microsoft. That's as much as we can say nowadays. We have gone so far away from being a closed ecosystem that it's not funny.
It's not built into GitHub, but GitHub has its own marketplace for continuous integration and stuff. Like you just have to pick what bits you use.
Right.
I find it interesting that if you were dealing with an organization that had a pipeline around GitHub, making it simple to simply check a code in there and knowing it's just going to kick that pipeline off, it just blurs the lines. The HTBox project already is using AppVeyor, more on the studio side, even though the repository is in GitHub.
Yeah, there's lots. I mean, again, GitHub is very open. You got to give them lots of credit for that. They're not saying, anything is blocked as long as you have the rights to a repo, and most of the time that's not an issue because most of them are public.
They're public.
You can
I
just
only need to read it.
Yeah, you just need to read it. So it makes it very easy for people to make extensibility around that and make it work for CI/CD for sure. And then people have so many options now.
I almost think it's overwhelming to try and choose, right? There's so many ways to do this.
People want guidance. That's one thing, like I feel like we as Microsoft Microsoft need to do better there. We have traditionally been giving maybe too much guidance to people, and I think we've stepped away from that a little bit since the community has lots of great paths that we don't want to sort of get in front of and try to be, do it our way. That's that's what it's
definitely
about
not
anymore.
one right way. That's for sure.
Yeah, but at the same time, people want some guidance. They want some example that they will at least know works, and then they can make a logical decision if they want to replace some part of that pipeline or do something completely different. But if, like, let's face it, we're all afraid of the unknown. And when you don't know the right path, even getting somebody like Microsoft or GitHub or Richard to tell you about it is much better than trying to figure it out yourself. How many times have we Googled something, found something random, and it turned out to be not the right path or the old way of doing things? That's always my fear. Like, is this still the way people do it? Is this the best way? You need people to tell you. I hope we can start doing better with that ourselves.
Yeah, the assembly of the right pipeline for a given organization, I think most of the time they get put together based on, this is what I did last time, this worked for me.
Yeah. Well, that's a powerful statement. If
I'm
it
totally
worked,
with you.
Solving a problem starts with being able to deliver something that starts to solve it, even if it's not the newest, shiniest way of doing it. How many times have, this is like the worst block people get. I want to code something, I have this idea, I'm passionate, I've got some spare time, and I'm going to go learn that new programming language to do it, right?
Right.
And it's like, so you're not going to code it tonight. You're not going to code it for a week unless you're brilliant or lucky.
Yeah, you're going to spend the next few days setting up that environment.
Yeah.
Right.
That one thing that just won't work, right? That you'll spend 4 hours on until your loved ones say, Daddy, come play with me. And you're like, all right, I'm not coding tonight.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. Over on the other show on Run As Radio, I did a show with Martin Woodward and Donovan Brown, and they talked a little bit about on the IT side of source control management and so forth. And we got into this conversation about Windows, the fact that Windows is now living in Git. It's like a 300 gigabyte repository. It's so much bigger than anything else in the world. It's it's an ancient piece of code.
And when you say 300 gigabytes, a lot of people think, oh, well, all of the history is 300 gigabytes. No. When you check it out on disk, it's 300 gigabytes. Just the latest version. It is huge. Wow. It is the biggest Git repository the world has ever seen.
It's basically taken up by a lot of if-then statements. If you're running Quicken, then do this. If you're running World of Warcraft, then do that.
That's right.
No, I'm sorry.
I don't think that's true.
There is a little bit of that, though.
I know, there is.
Once upon a time, the compatibility trace, that's Dare
Basanjo, Jeff Richter, we interviewed before that. He was notorious for revealing, there's special cases in there for this game and that program.
Keeping those things healthy. But it's just, you talk about a legacy project. I'm kind of astonished that they moved.
That's right.
It's astonishing, really.
Well, the thing is, if you look back, Windows used to be in a source control system called Source Depot.
Right.
And if you've never heard of Source Depot, you'd be forgiven because it's a Microsoft internal project. We built it just for ourselves. Yeah. And yet we're also building Team Foundation Server. We're building Visual Studio Team Services. We're contributing to the Git community. Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Right.
So we looked at the future of the Windows code base and realized that, everybody's moving to Git.
Right.
They needed to either move to TFVC or to Git.
Right.
TFVC is real similar to Source Depot. It would have been an easy decision, but it wouldn't have given them any new functionality. And if you're going to, like you said earlier, moving version control systems is hard.
Yeah.
So we decided to make the move and move them to Git, but we had to change Git in order to do that because you can't check in 300 gigabytes to Git.
Oddly enough.
It will fall down.
Oh, wow.
It will be a world of pain. So we had to build this tool called GVFS. It's the Git virtual file system. Okay. And it's what allows Git to scale to these massive repositories.
Yeah. And the beautiful thing is we made it open source.
That's right.
That's cool.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We've contributed, I think, a lot to make Git successful on Windows. If you look at like the tooling, right? If you go to GitHub and you're looking at something in the GitHub repo or in the Git repo, you often see the word Microsoft come up now because we've done something to make it work on Windows. And GVFS is another layer of contribution where now we're saying, look, for our internal team, back at the old Microsoft days, we would have made this for ourselves and kept it private. But now we think that there's lots of other scenarios where people want to check in really large things into Git. So over time, we'd like to make sure that GVFS becomes something they can take a look at.
And so what does GVFS do?
So GVFS virtualizes your Git repository. So instead of downloading everything, so when you run clone, usually you get all of the files and all of the history.
Right.
Now with GVFS, you get nothing. You get nothing at all.
I had that
feature.
before.
That's right. So you actually download just the structure of the repository, and when you look on disk, here's the magic: is GVFS is a driver,
Right.
And so when you look on disk, the GVFS driver, digs into the file system, the hierarchy of your Git repository, and shows you the files that are there.
Okay.
But they're not there.
Right.
So when you go and open it, that's when the driver kicks in. It downloads it from Visual Studio Team Services totally transparently and puts it on disk.
Right.
And you wouldn't think that would be fast, except when you're talking about 300 gigabytes. Most people aren't working in the whole Windows tree.
You virtually never need the whole 300 gigs.
Exactly.
I get it.
If you're working on Notepad, you don't need the Xbox source code. So
It's like OneDrive for Git.
that's exactly
almost.
what it is.
Yeah.
So that's the big advantage to GVFS. And there are some other magic things that we do with Git. We've made some changes to Git to allow it to scale in other different ways that other people can take advantage of even without GVFS.
It contribute. Yeah, it's all on GitHub, so you are contributing it back to the community if they want to use it.
Yeah, we don't do abandonware, right? One of the things that we really, really try to be good at is if we put something in GitHub, we're contributing to it. We have now even FTEs that we've hired in certain teams, like principal level C++ guys in many cases, or C guys who go in and they will contribute to community projects that help us, right? So again, I don't want to call out teams here, but there's plenty of teams that are thinking about community projects almost as their own now. They realize that in order for their product to work, they've got to have this project that's being already supported by the community keep up with the crazy pace of stuff we're releasing. Right. And when you release a feature that's not in the open source thing that makes the glue magic happen to Linux or whatever, man, we've got to go help those people, right? And with our projects, we come in and we keep maintaining them. So when you hear us move something to open source, we're not pushing it there to abandon it, right?
No.
We're there because we want to be part of the community.
Yeah, that's great.
What did Windows get for moving to Git? Like, what did it do for them?
Agility.
How so?
So it's much easier to do refactorings in Git. You can spin up a tiny little branch and send a pull request. It used to be that if you wanted to create a branch in the Windows Codebase and Source Depot, you needed to call somebody on the phone.
Wow.
And you needed to talk to somebody. And they needed to go in as an administrator and create a new branch for you.
Okay.
And now you've also got some policies around that because when you spin up a new branch, you probably want continuous integration. You need a build strategy for that. And building Windows is not cheap.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. How do you build 300 gigs worth of source code?
Please wait.
See you
and
tomorrow.
Spend a lot of money while you're waiting.
Yeah, no kidding.
So agility. So they've got better abilities to refactor Windows now.
Right. So it's actually helping the process of adding features. When you think about it, Windows has been moving really fast lately. Yes. I'm on the slow ring and I'm overwhelmed in the insider side. I hate to think about the fast ring folks.
The fast ring folks. Think about the internal folks.
Oh yeah.
I don't have a drop down that says slow ring, fast ring. I've got like branch names that are crazy.
Oh no.
It's overwhelming.
It's scary. But I think Git will really impact their ability to deliver there.
Wow. So they're sort of on a DevOps path too, right? Just sort of getting better at that continuous integration. What is the build process? Because I don't imagine it's probably something pretty internal.
I think it is. I don't actually know all the details about it by any stretch of the imagination, but we're recording in a big room right now.
Yeah.
Pretty sure it wouldn't fit the build lab.
Wow.
I bet it doesn't. It's just it's an interesting thing to think about. But it's also exciting to hear about a team with as much history. I mean, literally going back to the 80s, moving to a new source repository and one that's very current. That's right. That's actually the current way to think. It sort of sets a bar that says you really don't have any excuse.
Right.
You can move. If those guys can move, you can move.
That's
it's the best story. And we're going to tell the Windows story. It's actually, I'm a developer at heart, but I do work in the marketing team. So I will say that one of my pleasures, though, is being a marketer is sometimes you get to tell really awesome stories. And we want to tell the Windows story. So that's something we're going to work on over the next, 6 months to get that out there because it does show that if you're like, we have 500 developers, we're this huge shop, and that is huge, right? I mean, there's plenty of companies that do amazing things with hundreds of developers, but it's nothing to the scale of what Windows does. And if Windows can do it, if Office can do it, if all these, Xbox teams, if everybody can move to Visual Studio Team Services, so can you. But, like we talked about a couple of minutes ago, it takes a leap to go over that boundary of like, I don't know, right? If you don't know that this stuff works.
We did a show years ago when I think probably maybe in the 2008 timeframe, when there was a big push internal to Microsoft to move to Visual Studio.
Right.
It's like, again, sort of that dog food thing. And then part of that conversation was, yeah, we're all moving over except for Windows, Office, and SQL Server.
Right.
But now it sounds like those guys are moving too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are eating our own dog food in every possible way.
How's that Alpo taste?
It's got some bumps in it, but you know what? Every time we hit a bump and I curse at the bump, I realize that our customers won't have to, and to me that's worth it.
It is the ultimate dog food experiment.
Yeah. Every time my Outlook crashes because I'm using the super like we release aggressively, like Outlook and Office, all the Office products, they ship to my machine like once every other day almost. They get an update. Like customers should realize we're testing the heck out of it, and we're testing it across 100,000 employees.
Wow.
So, and I don't have a really an easy way to opt out of it. I figured out how. I needed one time to save myself. It was a long story, but for the most part, we keep it on, and that makes sure our customers are better. And the same thing with Azure, same thing with VSTS. I mean, when we push things into the cloud, for example, one of the beautiful things about Team Services is you get features kind of for free, right? You're in the cloud service. You don't have to upgrade something on your submachine somewhere. But that's also kind of a scary thing that Microsoft's pushing change into your product that you rely on, that when you need to get code out of it, it needs to come out of it, right? It can't be down or whatever. So we do rings. We push things out in a very safe nature to say, after all the testing's done and after all the dog fooding of that ring and our internal teams, so we make Windows pay the price before we make you pay the price.
Right.
And then even after that, we push it out in small chunks. So yes, sometimes you'll see like release notes go up on visualstudio.com about like Visual Studio Team Service has got this new feature, and you're like, I don't have it yet. It's coming, right? But we do that for your benefit.
Right.
We roll it out so that health is monitored for every stage, and it takes a huge mindset change as an organization to do that. I'm proud that Microsoft has done it, and we have to help others do the same, because this isn't the problem that Microsoft has. Everybody has this problem. Everyone's building their thing to be a cloud service, even if it's internal to their organization.
Yeah,
nowadays.
sort of continuous deployment mindset.
Yeah. You can't just can't continuously throw against the wall against everything, because you can't be down. That's the downside of being continuous. You can continuously bring yourself offline.
Yeah. Continuously broken? Excellent.
Yeah. Continuously broken. I like it. We should co-op that.
CB.
CICB.
Yes.
Continuously integrated, continuously broken.
That's it.
Well, guys, thanks for talking to us. This has been great. Edward Thomson, Dmitry, Lyalin, and thank you guys. What can I say? It's great stuff, and we should all be using it.
Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Rich.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Pleasure.
We'll see you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Pwop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.